All right, we've changed things around in the studio a little bit now to show you the typical kind of equipment that would be used in the home, from a converter to a video cassette recorder to a TV. Now, even though the products may be a little bit different from what you see here to what you have in your home, please keep in mind that the inputs and outputs and all the connections are going to be labeled very, very similarly. So anything that we show you here will carry over instantly to what you would be doing at home. Paul, I think first of all, let's give a definition of terms so that people know what we're talking about when we start to do it. The first thing on our list, if anybody has in fact, we're going to be using this VTR cable booklet. We're just going to be going right down the back here, so if you have this at home already, follow along with us. The first thing is the AB switch. Paul, what's the definition of the AB switch?
Sure. The AB switch allows us to select what's going into the television set by flipping the switch back and forth from the A side to the B side. And you see that we've clearly labeled the input connections, input A, input B, and to the set.
Okay. Next thing on the list is basic channels versus pay channels. Now, the basic channels would be any of those channels on space cable that you do not have to have or pay a premium for. Now, if you take a look at the channel card here, you can see that the pay channels are listed with an asterisk. So everybody has a channel card at home. The pay channels are something that, of course, you pay additional for if you have Home Theater Network or Disney or Showtime, Cinemax, or whatever. These are optional services. So these are pay channels as opposed to basic channels, which you get with your basic subscriber service. The next is the cable converter. And the cable converter is the device which actually permits the selection of different channels. And we'll show you the front of the converter here. Paul, there are different converters in the system, though, aren't there?
Depending on where you live, you might have a box that looks a little bit different, John. But the basic point here is that on the back of the converter, you'll always have an input and an output connection, and they're clearly labeled above the connectors.
Okay, next on the list is input, which you already mentioned. Input means simply something coming in, and the opposite of that is output, something going out.
Right.
So we're going to follow, and really it helps to think, too, in terms of a sequence, that and if you have an input to something, it has to have an output until you get to the final thing in line, which is usually the TV set, or in some cases the VCR, and that if that's the final thing in line, then it just ends at that point. But up until that point, everything that has an input also has an output.
Sure, and both the cable converter and the VCR have an input and an output.
Jumper cables.
Well, we've got one right here.
You don't use them to start your car in the wintertime if you have a dead battery.
Inside the bag, there's a few jumper cables. They're all the same and have a threaded connector. So you put the connection in and then turn it clockwise to tighten it down. And it should be tightened up so that it's just snug up against there.
Let's look at the two-way splitter next.
The two-way splitter, just like the AB switch, has 3 terminals on it, but this time they're labeled output, output, and the one that's set alone by itself is the input connector.
The next term that we want to concern ourselves with is the output channel on the VCR. It's very important that your VCR be tuned to channel 4 because in Cleveland, channel 3 is used by WKYC TV. So we never want to conflict anything with channel 4. The output on your VCR is on channel 4, and of course Space Cable tunes on your TV set or VCR to channel 4. But it is important to keep in mind that the output channel selector on your VCR be on 4. The next thing you have to be concerned about with your interconnection of cable to video cassette recorder is the VCR output switch. And this selector, TV VCR selector, is on all of the video cassette recorders, and you should refer to your manual on your video cassette recorder to find out which position that has to be in to make everything work. And the last term that we need to consider in this interconnection is the VHF antenna terminal input. Paul, where is that?
Sure, John. And again, remember, it depends on exactly what make and model television set you have, but on the back of the television set, you should find a terminal marked VHF. On this particular set, it's this set of screw terminals here, and so I'll need this matching transformer, which if you're a cable customer, you should already have, and I would screw it on here, which will give me the cable connection.
Okay, now some TV sets also have this connector down here, which is the 75 ohm input. And we could bypass the matching transformer and plug our jumper cable directly into there, could we not?
Right, John. Again, it depends on exactly how your television set is set up. Some of them will say cable in and will already have that terminal on without having to put on a matching transformer.
Okay, now that we've gone through the definition of terms, let's take a look at how the actual system interconnects from A through Z or whatever it might be. So Paul, why don't you give me the actual description of what I'm going to be doing. I'll perform the operation, okay?
Right. And if you look, John, we've selected on this one to choose application B. We've decided that what we want to do is to be able to watch a pay channel while recording any of our basic channels. So we've picked application B, and we're going to wire it up as it's shown inside instructions B. Now you'll see that the first instructions are to disconnect all of the jumpers, and we've done that here. We've got everything taken apart so that we have all of the parts right in front of us here. The first thing you'll want to do, John, is to connect the cable coming from the wall outlet, the wall plate in your home, and we've got a cable run inside here. You want to connect that to the input of the two-way splitter.
Okay, here's the splitter and here's the cable. Now this does have to be fitted, and it's a screw-on connector. Okay, that's
there you
done.
Go. Nice and snug, right?
Now we'll assume, too, that your converter is plugged in already and it's ready to go.
Second thing we want to do, John, is take a jumper, and we want to hook the jumper up from one side of the splitter, from the output of the splitter, and we want to hook that up to the input terminal of the converter.
Okay, once again, we're screwing the... Now we've gone one cable in, and this is one side of the output, so we're splitting the signal here. The signal is now split in two. One side is going, now this side is going where?
To the input of the cable converter.
Okay, the input of the cable converter. It says input on the back, and I'll just screw this in. Okay, to the input of the cable converter.
Oh, that looks good. Now we want to take a second jumper, John, and connect it from the other side of the two-way splitter. And we want to hook that to the input of the VCR.
Okay, the other side of the splitter out to the input of the VCR. Now here's something to keep in mind too. On the back of the video cassette recorder, we're going to the VHF inputs and not the UHF, and that the in might be on top in some models, it might be on the bottom in the other, but we're going to the input of the VCR. Okay, that's done.
Now, John, let's take another jumper and connect it from the output of the VCR to the A side of the AB switch, and it's marked A.
Okay. Output of the VCR. Make sure the connectors are tight to the which?
The A side of the AB switch.
Okay, input A on the AB switch. Okay.
And now we need a jumper from the output of the converter to the B side of the AB switch.
Output of converter, which is over here. To the
B side, the remaining side.
Okay. Okay, so now we have the inputs A and B, so that as we operate the switch, then we will have the capability of determining the input to that particular unit.
And now let's, obviously you can see that we're reaching the end here. Let's take the final jumper and connect it from the output of the AB switch to the input of the television set.
Okay.
I'll put this one on for you.
Go ahead, yeah.
In this case, it has a cable-ready connection, and it goes on just like that.
So we'll bypass that matching transformer.
Right.
Now that we have everything interconnected, it's time to hook things up with the electricity and then go ahead and actually operate the entire system. So we'll show you how to operate in a simple ABCD process, but first let's make sure that the TV set electrical is plugged into the cable converter so that when you turn the converter on, the TV is going to go on, and that the electrical for the video cassette recorder will be plugged into the wall, because many video cassette recorders, in fact most, have a clock mechanism and timer times and things of this nature that if you plugged it into the converter would actually go off, and you don't want that to happen. So you keep that plugged into the wall separately. Now that we've done all the electrical interconnection, everything's plugged in as it should be, both for the electricity and for the cable wiring, let's go through the operation of the standard B hookup that we have just demonstrated. And Paul, what's the objective of the B hookup once again?
John, the B hookup is for those subscribers that want to be able to watch any of their cable services, including the pay channels, while they're recording the basic channels or the unscrambled channels.
Okay, so what's the step-by-step process now?
First thing that we'll want to do, John, is to record a program. So the first step is to put the VCR output switch into the VCR mode position. And then the second thing we do is put the AB switch into the A position. Next, set the TV channel selector, or the tuner, to channel 4. Then select the channel that you want to record from on the channel selector of your VCR. You may have to tune the VCR a little bit to get the best picture.
So there are really two devices that would need to be fine-tuned here. One would be the VCR, perhaps if it's brand new and first set up, you might need to fine-tune this for the channels. Same thing with the TV.
That's right, John. Both of them have a tuner, and the owner's manual should be consulted for fine-tuning the VCR. Sometimes they're a little tricky, so always check the operating manual. Finally, the last thing we need to do is to manually start the recording or to set the timer on the VCR according to the VCR instructions.
Now what if we want to watch another channel while we are recording or for normal viewing?
Well, the first thing we do is to put the AB switch into the B position, then to set the TV channel selector to channel 4, and finally you can view all of the channels with the channel selector on the converter.
Okay, and then finally, Paul, if we want to play this tape back.
Put the VCR output switch into the VCR position, put the AB switch into the A position, then set the TV tuner to channel 4, and just start the tape.
Okay, and that pretty much wraps up the entire interconnection and operation of the video cassette recorder to the cable system. Now, if any of you should have any questions after going through this procedure, watching the videotape and reading the directions in the VCR instruction booklet, please feel free to call any of the Space Cable offices. If you live in Garfield Heights, Independence, Valley View, Walton Hills, Cuyahoga Heights, or Newburgh Heights, call the Garfield Heights office. They can take your information over there, answer your questions at that office. If you're in Strongsville, Middleburg Heights, or Columbia Township, call the Strongsville office. Or if you're in Sheffield Lake, Sheffield Village, or the city of Avon, by all means call the Sheffield Lake office and they can answer your VCR hookup questions out there. But hopefully this program and this book and the VCR kit will give you an idea as to how to make the video cassette recorder work for you on the cable system. I think, Paul, that it's a marriage of two very compatible systems. The fact that there are so many movies and so many special events on cable TV that people should want to record them, that if they have a video cassette recorder, a cable, or rather if they have cable TV, a video cassette recorder is a very, very good asset. And two, the way I started to say it, if you have a video cassette recorder, cable is another good thing to have for it.
Sure, John. And again, we have everything for all of the makes and models that are out there. So there's no reason that we can't help everybody enjoy that.
Absolutely. Well, enjoy your video cassette recording, enjoy your cable system, and make sure that if you do have any questions, be sure to give us a call because we are happy to help. So, for Paul Mills, Director of Engineering, myself, John Chapman, Director of Programming, enjoy recording from Space Cable.
This has been a Space Cable production.